morning everyone, I am Maria Roda and we're going to tackle a really important topic, how we see history and more importantly, whose stories get told. We're calling this presentation in history, but what we're really focusing on today is making sure that history isn't just a one-sided story. Lesson objectives. By the end of this lesson, the students will be able to perceive how minority groups had been represented in historical text, understand how these representations were created and propagated in history, and lastly, appreciate the importance of proper representation of diverse cultures, peoples, and sectors in history. To frame our discussion, let's quickly look at the key terms. Social history, a subdiscipline of history that deals with particular social sectors. Traditionally, social history is concerned with social movements. Patriarchy, a social system where men hold more power compared to women. Secessionism, the act of or advocacy for independence from and no longer being part of a country. Historical injustice, a past moral wrong committed against a group of people that has a lasting impact on the well-being of currently living people. The issue we face is historical injustice. This means past wrongs against specific groups that still affect people today. Think about it. History has often been written by the victors. This leads to harmful misrepresentations of marginalized groups that persist even now in media and education. These misrepresentations breed misunderstanding, discrimination, fear, and unnecessary social divisions. Correcting these portrayals is crucial if we want to address the injustice suffered by women, indigenous peoples, and religious minorities. Addressing misrepresentation through history from below. It's about fixing how history is told because traditional history usually focuses too much on big stuff like the government, the church, and great men. So this causes misrepresentation which leads to misunderstanding and discrimination against ordinary people or minority groups like indigenous peoples or specific genders. Reynaldo Lieto was a historian who brought a fresh perspective to studying history, especially the voices of ordinary people. He believed that to truly understand the masses, we couldn't just read documents written by the elite or those in power. The second misrepresentation is woman in Philippine history. Gender egalitarian, which means men and women are equally valuable members. So they did different tasks, but those tasks are considered as equal. The Babaylan served as the primary spiritual leaders in ancient Philippine society. Babaylan functions as the community's healer, responsible for prescribing indigenous cures, utilizing medicinal herbs or spiritual interventions.
So today I'll be tackling about the Spanish colonization and repression of women. Upon the Spaniards' arrival in the 16th century, the place of the woman and of the Baybayin was altered. So before the Spaniards came, women in the Philippines had a respective role. And we used to lead rituals and help the community spiritually was replaced by Spanish priests. Catholic faith carried an ideology aimed at repressing women's bodies and limiting them to the domestic sphere. The Spanish religion taught that women should stay at home, take care of the house, and act modest and quiet. Women were not encouraged to be leaders or work outside. Instead of allowing women to practice healing or trade, they were told to cook, clean, and take care of children. The Babaylan, whether a human or a man who looks like a woman, was displaced and painted as heathen or satanic, accused of being mangkukulam or manggagaway. So the Spaniards did not accept the Babaylan's traditional beliefs. They called them evil witches or followers of the devil to destroy their influence in society. A female healer helping sick villagers could be accused of witchcraft because the Spaniards didn't understand. The role of spiritual leader was transferred to the Farriers, who also represented Spanish colonial government. Women's bodies were repressed, expected to cover themselves with tapis, saya, camisa, and pañuelo. Women were told to dress very modestly. They had to cover most of their bodies because the Spanish believed showing skin was improper. Good women were devoted to prayers in church, submissive, docile, virginal, and sacrificial for their husbands and children. The Spanish created an idea of what a proper woman should be: obedient, quiet, religious, pure, and willing to sacrifice for her family. Jose Rizal's female character, Maria Clara, embodied the ideal woman during the Spanish period: frail, meek, prudish, and protected by men. So I'm done tackle about the Spanish colonization and repression of women. So next I'm going to tackle is the American period and continuity of gender inequality. During the American colonial period, many of the old ideas about women's roles and status continued, even though some things in society were changing. The image of an ideal Filipino woman persisted even after Spanish colonization. This means that the idea of what a good or perfect Filipino woman should be like didn't really change much from the Spanish times to the American times. Typically, this ideal woman was seen as modest, religious, focused on her family, and a homemaker. Despite universal public instruction, women were still subordinate. Universal public instruction meant that schools were open for everyone, including girls. Even though women could now get an education, they were still often treated as less important or powerful than men in many aspects of society. They were subordinate, meaning they were of a lower rank or position. Political equality was delayed. Women were only allowed to vote and run for public office in 1937. Political equality means having the same rights as men in government and public life. For Filipino women, this right to vote in election and to hold government position or run for public office came much later in 1937. This shows there was a delay in giving them equal political power. Cultural assimilation and beauty standards. During these times, Filipinos started to adopt some American ways of life and culture, which also changed how beauty was seen. Hollywood and Western media popularized the idea that white is beautiful. Hollywood movies, magazines, and other media from Western countries or like the United States showed many actors and models who had fair skin and European features. This made many people believe that having white skin was the most beautiful and desirable look. Filipino women were made to feel that their brown complexion and Filipino features were ugly compared to Caucasian or mestiza features. Because of the influence of Western media, many Filipino women started to feel that their natural brown skin tone and distinct Filipino facial features were not as attractive. They were led to believe that lighter skin or mixed race features, which often included lighter skin and different facial structures, were superior and more beautiful. This created a sense of insecurity and a preference for Western beauty ideals. Catholic conservatism loosened, but women still had fewer chances and heavier chores. Even though the strict church rules relaxed a bit, women still had fewer opportunities to do what they wanted and had to take on more household work. Women were objectified in movies, books, and beauty pageants like the Manila Carnival. Women were often treated as objects for looks or entertainment, not as people but with their own rights. During World War II, women faced hunger, violence, death, and sexual abuse. In the war, women suffered from serious problems like not enough food, violence, losing loved ones, and being abused sexually. Women who found comfort in Japanese stations were forced into sexual slavery. Some women went to Japanese-run comfort stations were made to work as sex slaves against their will. Many women stayed silent for decades because they felt ashamed and guilty, and justice has not been fully achieved. Women kept quiet about their suffering for a long time because they felt embarrassed or guilty and still haven't gotten full justice. So next, I'll be tackling feminism, gender equality and fighting sexism, more people started to support women's rights and equal treatment between men and women. Women began to speak up for equal pay and opportunities in jobs. Despite this, sexism is still a big problem in society. Even with progress, many unfair ideas about women still exist. There are still many male politicians and leaders, and are often dismissed as overly emotional or hysterical. Women in politics often serve as helpers to male relatives. Are sometimes just there to support their male family members in politicals, not as leaders themselves. A woman might be the wife or sister of a male politician and not have her own independent rule. Back, all Filipino ideas about gender and behavior still influence us. The traditional beliefs about how men and women should act still affect our society today. Many people still think women should mainly stay at home and not be leaders. So next I'll be tackled about Moros in the Philippine history. Origin of the term Moro. The word Moro comes from the Spanish history referring to the Muslim rules of Spain are called Moros, Moors who came to Morocco in North Africa. When the Spanish talk about the Muslims in the Philippines, they used the word Moro because it reminded them of the Moors they fought in Spain. After the fall of Granada, after Spain defeated the last Muslim kingdom in Granada, they colonized the Philippines in 1565. They called the local people they met Indios or Indians, but this term didn't last. The Spanish thought they were like the people in the Americas, so they called them Indians, but later realized the indigenous people in the Philippines were different. The term Moro was not indigenous to Mindanao. The term Moro was not originally used by the people of Mindanao but was applied by the Spanish to describe the Islamized people there. The Spanish used the word Moro as a label for Muslims in the Philippines even though the local people had their own names and identities. Major ethno-linguistic groups that embraced Islam. These are the main groups of people who followed Islam in the Philippines: Tausug or Sulu, Sama of Tawi-Tawi, Yakan of Basilan, Maranao of Lanao, and Magindanaon of Maguindanao. The Tausug people in Sulu are known for their strong Islamic culture and traditions. Historical Spanish references. The word Moro appears in old Spanish writings, sometimes alongside another term for Muslims or Mahometan. Old Spanish books and documents mentioned Moros when talking about the Muslims in the Philippines. A Spanish Angustian chronicle noted, a Spanish writer wrote that Islam was spreading so quickly that if the Spanish had arrived later, everyone might have become Muslim. The Spanish feared that Islam was like a disease. That would convert all the Filipinos if they didn't stop it. Islam spread to the Philippines through trade. Islam came to the Philippines through trade with other countries in the 13th to 14th century. Muslim traders from Brunei, Malacca, and Moluccas brought their religion with them when they came to trade goods. The Americans avoided Spanish-style friction. The Americans tried not to be as confrontational as the Spanish and used education instead of force to influence the Moros. Instead of fighting the Moros, the American built schools to teach them American ways and values.
Hello sir, good morning. My topic is all about the Moros in the Philippine history. Origin of the term Moro. The word Moro traces back to the Spanish history, referring to the Moorish rule of Spain on 711 to 1492 by people from Morocco, North Africa. After the fall of Granada, Spain colonized the Philippines in 1565, naming the local people they encountered. Indigenous peoples from Luzon, Visayas were called Indios by the Spaniards, but the term did not last. The term Moro was not indigenous to Mindanao. inhabitants but was misappropriated by the Spanish to describe Islamized people there. Major into linguistic groups that embrace Islam: Tausug of Sulu, Sama of Tawi-Tawi, Yakan of Basilan, Maranao of Lanao, Maguindanao of Maguindanao. Historical Spanish references. The word Moros appears in the Blair and Robertson's 53 volume, sometimes alongside Mahometan, another term for Muslim. A Spanish Augustinian chronicler noted, "Sewell-rooted was the cancer that had the arrival of the Spaniards been delayed, all the people would have become Moors." Islam spread to the Philippines through trade by the 13th to 14th century. Islam in the Philippines before Spanish arrival. Islam entered through trade routes from Borneo, Malacca, and the Moluccas. American colonial approach. The Americans avoided Spanish-style fractions and used non-violent means such as education. Example, a normal school in Zamboanga in 1904 earlier than the University of the Philippines in 1908. By the 1920s, Moro resistance continued. J. Ralston Hayden on 1928 wrote, "In 1926, over 20 schoolhouses around Lake Lana were born, collapsing the province's education system. Some districts could not be visited as safely without a soldier's escorts. Many Moros refused to secure land titles or pay taxes. A deadly triangle of the hatred and intrigue existed among Filipinos, Moros, and Americans. The Spaniards painted the Moro image as warlike people, barbarians, and uncivilized and unruly. Murillo Velarde described Muslims in Mindanao as tenacious in their errors, unfaithful to their words, traitors to their dealings, fearless in war, rash. Spaniards set Indios against Moros, deepening divisions during colonization. Persistent hatred and intrigue existed among Filipinos, Moros, and Americans. Some Moros aimed to expel Filipinos and root out their civilization. Moro political status in the 1920s to 1940s, Americas began turning government over to Filipino only on paper by the 1920s. Historian Najib Salibay, on 1913, coined the term Moro problem, how to integrate Moros into the Philippine body politic. Yet discrimination persisted. Captain John Pershing, on 1909 to 1913, was quoted, "The only good Moro is a dead Moro." In 1924, Moro leaders wrote to us, the U.S. Congress, "You have left us a defenseless, and it is your duty to protect us or to return to the weapons you took from us and which we freely give you, relying on your promises." These leaders came from prestigious landed families educated under the Americans. Those who joined the Philippine government also came from prominent families. The Moro identity and struggle in the Philippines. Historical context. Post-independence inclusion. After Japanese occupation and the Philippine independence, Moro were excluded from mainstream politics during the Third Republic. The Jabida Massacre of 1968 ignited a Moro political awakening. Multiple secessionist movements emerged, starting with the Muslim independence movement. Emergence of the Moro identity. Normiswari, a UP instructor, coined the term Moro National Liberation Front in 1972, giving Moro a positive meaning. Bangsa Moro connect to the Islamic concept of the Ummah, community, with the idea of nation. The term Moro remains contested as a foreign imposition, similar to Filipino derived from King Philip II of Spain. Okay, questions. Who is a Moro? A Muslim Filipino identifying primarily with the Philippines, or a Filipino Muslim identifying primarily with Islam. Those who valuing the spiritual identity by prioritizing Islam are valid in their choice. Balik Islam. The classification of Balik Islam or converts to Islam is debated. Are they Moro or just Muslim Filipinos? Current struggles. More struggles include political and cultural assertion in the predominantly non-Muslim country. Second, the discrimination based on faith persists. Third, historical injustices were committed by both foreign colonizer and some Filipino who treated Moros as second-class citizens. The last one is the association of Muslims with terrorism unfairly stigmatized the entire community despite the most being peaceful. That's all my part, sir. Thank you.